Good morning. Well, at least it's morning for me right now as I'm recording this. Welcome. Give me 1 second while I get our slides up here. Okay. Alrighty. So, before I introduce myself, I think it's so important that we start off these meetings with this Theodore Roosevelt quote. Excuse me. Um, People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that doesn't just apply to clients, but that applies, I think, to all human interactions. I could sit here and spit out all this knowledge to you guys, but I think it's so important for you to know first that um, I'm not just an adoption assessor coming into your space telling you um, some tips and tricks. I am somebody who has been in your shoes. So I live in Bowling Green, Ohio, and I used to volunteer as a client advocate at my local pregnancy center. It's been a while, but I do remember how hard it was to speak on adoption in that context. And I'll go over a minute here some of the titles that I bear, and even with those titles that I have, it was still difficult to feel comfortable and confident without this additional information that I now have, but didn't have back then. So I empathize with you guys. I know that you are doing beautiful, wonderful, amazing work. And I'm just so appreciative that we get to partner together. I don't want to ever communicate that we as an agency are looking to be fishers of women, trying to make our adoption numbers go up. That's not our goal at all. Our goal here is to equip you. I'm assuming your staff is all ladies. If there's gentlemen on your staff too, just equip you ladies with confidence and the language to be able to share confidently on adoption, so that each mama can have the full array of choices that she has. But we'll get into a little bit of why that's so difficult. I'm sure many of you already know of quite a bit of why it's so difficult, but just get into some of the more social worky type stuff that will be helpful. We won't go super deep into the social work. Don't worry, I'm not going to overwhelm you with like psychology and that kind of stuff. We'll just go over some of the basics, but it's all really important information to have. So with that being said, we're going to start. So my name is Jennifer May. I am a birth mama. So it was about 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago, I placed my child for adoption. That was a very difficult choice, and I'm not going to get fully into my story here, but there was a lot of grief with that. But to me, grief does not equate regret, because I know my child is better off. I placed my child for a different, prayerfully better life, but I know my child's better off, and I was safeguarded from the biological father who had no intent to love me or love my child, our child, well as we deserve. So, beyond my personal experience, I do have quite a bit of professional experience as well. So, I am a licensed social worker, and I'm an adoption assessor, which means I've had additional training in adoption through the state of Ohio. And I've been with Spirit of Faith Adoptions, goodness, for a little over 8 years. But I've been volunteering in adoption long before that. So I have also written a book. I do public speaking. So if you wanted to check that out and know a little bit more about a birth mom story from a Christ following point of view, I do have the link below for you guys to check that out. So I will be sending this presentation as well as this video so that you guys will be able to click on the links that I have in here, because there's going to be more links throughout. So like state paperwork and that kind of stuff, just so you can get a little more acclimated to what exactly the adoption process looks like. So if mamas have any questions, or dads, as the case may be, coming in to receive information, be equipped with knowledge from you guys, you can speak a little bit more on what that looks like. Alrighty, this is our training today. So sharing adoption, speaking with clients about adoption with confidence, dignity, and grace. So we are a Christ-centered organization. We are big on sharing the gospel, but not shoving it down women's throats or men's. We want to be a light to these moms and these dads, to help them see their worth and their dignity. We do work with quite a bit of people, but not many end up placing. And I think that is truly a testament to us as an organization, that we really aren't looking to increase our numbers. We're not looking to take babies. We are looking to, first and foremost, keep families together, equip them with knowledge, with resources, with support, so that they feel confident in order to be able to parent. And our numbers do show that parenting overall is the choice that these moms and dads make. But when that's not an option for these parents to be able to parent their children, and they desire to make an adoption plan, that's when we pivot from the resources, which we still do with them, even if they choose to place, but we pivot from the trying to help them parent to helping them make an adoption plan, and making sure that they feel peace over their decision throughout the course. All right, this is some of the stuff that we're going to be touching on today. So why is talking about adoption so difficult? Some key concepts and terms when speaking with clients. Some of you may know that, like, for example, we say placed a child for adoption versus gave a child up for adoption. And there's some historical reasons behind that, of where the gave the child up for adoption comes from. And we'll get more into that once we get there. And not to scare you at all, but we're going to talk a little bit about laws and policy. That one's going to have a lot of links into it. Sorry. That one's going to have a lot of links in it, so that if you wanted to check out some of the paperwork that we do with biological moms and dads, you're welcome to. We're not going to get super deep into the laws and policy. I am a social worker. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't have a law mind, if you will. But I still think it's good to know some of that information. So if your clients have any questions, or if they're considering adoption and they just have no idea what questions to ask, you can come to that table having some information to share with them. And again, it all comes back to helping you guys feel confident and equipped, so that when you're talking to these parents about adoption, you are a trustworthy source for them. And I don't expect you guys to know everything about adoption by the end of this, just to help equip you, and then having me as a resource, or Spirit of Faith Adoptions as a resource, to say, you know what, client, I don't know, Miriam, I don't know that answer, but I would be happy to call Jen and ask. We can get some of those answers. Some other things that we're going to talk about are spotting red flag agencies. So from my understanding, you have to have a few different agencies to refer moms to. You can't just have one. I don't know if that's still how that works, or if that's just some of the pregnancy centers that I've been to, or if it's across the board how it is. But just giving you some language to talk to different agencies, so that you can help your organization vet out some agencies that might not align with what you are wanting to send clients to. And then let's role play. So that's more for in-person type trainings, but certainly you guys can take that slide that I have at the end and kind of go back and forth with role playing. on that. So, as stated, why is talking about adoption so difficult? So we've all either been parented or we are parents. So we have that base knowledge. Maybe we've had examples of how not to parent, or we've had amazing parents who've shown up for us and did an awesome job parenting us. Regardless, we all have that baseline knowledge of what parenting is. So talking about parenting is so easy because we have that knowledge. Whereas adoption, we might have a little bit of knowledge or none at all, depending on if you have adoption in your family or a close friend. If we don't have that knowledge, it's so hard to speak on that. Going into a room where this woman is, or man and woman are feeling fear and anxious, and they're looking to you to gain knowledge. And if you don't have the knowledge to be able to speak to them, that's really intimidating feeling for the client advocate going into the room. Feeling ill-equipped is not a fun space to be. And so let's help you with that. So some of the other areas of why it's so hard to talk about are cultural biases. And this may be something that even you are bringing into the pregnancy center because you don't know a whole lot about adoption other than what culture says about adoption. Give me 1 second. Oh, there we go. Sorry, my mouse was being a little wonky there. Okay, so here's our cultural biases. Let's see if I can get myself a little smaller here. Okay. So some cultural biases are birth mom equals bad mom. So to place a child for adoption automatically means that that mom is a horrible mom, that she didn't love her child and she wanted to get rid of her child, which truly is not the case. Granted, I work in private adoption, so I'm working with women and men who are choosing to place for adoption. They're not having CPS come in usually, and they're not having their children taken from them because they're struggling and not able to care for their child in the way that that child needs to be cared for. These are moms and dads, if they're involved, who are seeing a lack of resource in their environment or are seeing an inability in themselves to parent to some sort of capacity, that their innate parental drive to love and protect their child brings them to the choice of adoption. So it's a sacrificial love that brings them to that choice. And that's not a bad parent at all. That is a loving, amazing parent that would put their child above their own desires. And I don't mean that in a narcissistic way as I sit here as I'm a birth mom myself, but I mean that as in the women that I work with and the men that I work with are some of the most courageous, amazing, loving, empathetic people I have ever met. Yes, they're going through trauma. Yes, their environments might not be ideal, or they might have something going on in their family lives or with themselves that's obviously bringing them to this choice, but they are just amazing human beings that deserve support. And I am just in awe of birth moms and birth dads who make that ultimate sacrifice. So another thing I'm sure you've ran into, which is a cultural bias, is that adoption equals foster care. And that's just not the truth. Adoption and foster care are two totally different things. So foster care is when a child goes into a temporary home with the intent that that child will go back with the biological family once the biological family meets XYZ, whatever it is that is in the case plan for that biological family. Whereas adoption, excuse me, let me back up. In foster care, the biological family does not choose where that child goes. And so in adoption, the biological family gets to look at different profiles of families and gets to choose who they want their child to be placed with. I'll get more in the laws and materials of how that kind of goes on, but just to kind of touch base on that, a biological family has to do what's called a social and medical history, which is exactly what it sounds like, but it's a state form that they have to do, and it's the social medical history back to their grandparents. So it doesn't go back any farther than that, and it doesn't need to go to like way out aunts and uncles and that kind of stuff, just brothers, sisters, moms, dads, grandmas, grandpas. And that gives us an idea of what the genetic makeup of this child might be. And so we line up the social and medical history with the child characteristic checklist that the hopeful adoptive family makes. So the way that works is we ask our hopeful adoptive families to do some research and consider what they are able to do. And what I mean by that is in the social and medical history of the biological family, if we come across a biological family that has really cumbersome medical needs, and our hopeful adoptive families over here live way out in the country. They don't have access to immediate medical help that this child might need. We ask them to consider, are you willing to travel? Is traveling even something that's in the radius of where you are that's reasonable? If you have to go from Ohio way out to Chicago to get medical care, is that something that you're willing to do? If that's not something that you're able to do, whether it be you have other children that have other cumbersome needs and you can't devote that much time and energy, then we're going to ask you to consider, is that something that I can handle? Or if we have a child who has a biological family with a lot of mental health issues, if you don't live anywhere near mental health resources, is that something that you can travel to? Is that something that you have the resources, the time, the energy, any of that to undertake? With understanding that while we can do some planning and help these hopeful adoptive families plan for what their child might need, God is going to give each kiddo their each individual personalities, and each kiddo is going to come with their own genetic makeup that we might not even have been able to prepare for. And these families understand that. We just try to help them prepare as much as possible so that they are equipped to the fullest extent that we can equip them to care for these kiddos. So adoption and foster care are not the same, and these biological families are looking at profiles of hopeful adoptive families who would best line up with what their child's needs might be. We're not calling random people asking them, hey, can you please take this baby? But we're working with moms and dads to help them make their best choice of who they want to parent their child. Let's see. Yeah, so staff and volunteers struggle with these biases too. I've heard before that biological families should stay together and that's the end all be all. And while I certainly agree that that needs to be top tier priority, there are some women that aren't ready, able, or equipped to parent. Unfortunately, I have worked with women who have conceived through violence. And in order to safeguard themselves and their child, they've chosen to place their child for adoption so that they were not connected forever to that perpetrator. So we certainly do all that we can to equip these moms and dads to parent first and foremost, but there are just some cases where moms, I mean, to bring it to a worldly feminist view, some women don't want to parent, but they also don't believe that abortion is something that they want to do, or they are too far along when finding out that they're pregnant and they don't want to be moms. And so adoption is their choice. And again, we are a Christian agency. We believe that abortion is not God's plan, but we also understand that we're working with individuals who don't necessarily have our faith. And so to hold them to our same standards is not not doable. And certainly we advocate that they get resources and get support and get help. But ultimately that choice of what they choose is on them. Just as I'm sure you guys know that when you have abortion vulnerable women coming into your agency, you do what you can to equip her and show her love and kindness and grace and respect. But ultimately that choice that she makes, that's on her. She has autonomy of what she chooses. That's not on you. And so while that's, I'm sure, extremely difficult when that happens, it's not on you. It's between her and God. And I remember back when I worked in a pregnancy center, they used to state it as even if a woman chooses to go through with an abortion, you have planted a seed in her of faith, of God's love. So while that seed might not be watered for many, many years, you've done your job. You have been a good and faithful servant. Because ultimately, the success is not in the outcome of any of this. Our success is in following God, following His lead, and doing as He asks. So there's a lot of peace and comfort in that, I think. Yeah, so having biases is human nature, and it does not equate a character flaw. So if you've come into this training thinking that biological families should stay together and adoption should never be a thing, or if you think that women who place a child for adoption are bad moms, that doesn't mean that you have a character flaw by any means. You are allowed to think as you think. But when it comes to sharing information with families that are coming in to gain this information, we need to make sure that we lay down our biases and just give the information. I have a pregnancy center that I work with that is amazing. And one of the gals there say that we're more pro-choice than pro-choice people are, because we share all the information with the moms. Adoption, parenting, and we talk about abortion. We don't refer to it or refer for it, excuse me, but we tell them what it is and what happens and the possible physical and mental, emotional impacts of that. But they are very intentional to share all of it, including adoption. Which, again, when you have confidence from having knowledge, that's a lot easier to do than when you're going in there not being confident in, because you don't know what to share with these women. And when I'm sure you've run into this many a times, get some pushback, get some of that cultural biases spoken to you. Oh, I could never, or I would rather abort my child than give them up for adoption. It's hard to sit in that space and lovingly and with grace and kindness push back on that and give them the unbiased information of what is adoption actually. All right, so we've gone over some of this already. All children should stay with their biological families. And while family preservation is absolute paramount, sometimes a child's not safe to stay in that home. And biological moms and or dads, if they're involved, understand that and see that. And it doesn't necessarily mean safety as in physical safety. It could be mental or emotional safety. And again, some parents are just not willing or able to parent. And it's not our job to, let me rephrase that. It's not your job to assess if somebody is able to parent or not. It's your job to give the information with kindness, grace, and love. So some of the other cultural biases are when legal parental rights are surrendered or terminated, biological parents should lose all access to relationship with that child. So in other words, when a mom places a child for adoption, she's no longer a mom and has no right to, and I mean moral right here, not lawful right, no moral right to interact with that child ever again. And this all stems from that cultural bias of birth mom or birth dad equals bad parent, which, as we've heard, that's just not true. And while adoption has a really ugly past of, I don't want to get too much into this, but like in the 60s, when women were pregnant out of wedlock, they would be sent away to pregnant mothers' homes. Many of them would give birth, and then the nurses would immediately take the baby away. Wouldn't let the mom see the baby, wouldn't let the mom hold the baby, and then the baby would be placed for adoption. And these moms were told, forget about this, forget this ever happened, just go back to your life as normal, and you'll be good. And that's just not how humans work. Because that is so, from a biological, psychological standpoint, that woman is impacted for the lifelong from being pregnant and delivering that beloved child. So today, that is not what adoption looks like. With ethical agencies, I can't speak for all other agencies, but across the board, it is the norm for adoptions to be a open adoption. And open adoption is on a continuum. So in the state of Ohio, it is considered an open adoption when a biological mom looks at profile books of hopeful adoptive parents or biological dad if he's involved. You'll hear me say that throughout, if he's involved. The reason I'm saying that is not because I'm biased against him or I think that he doesn't deserve to have a say in adoptions. I say that because, unfortunately, a lot of the women who choose adoption they've been abandoned in some sense by the biological father. He's not present. That is not to say that biological dads aren't capable of being amazing, loving, supportive men, because I have seen that. I have sat at a table supporting a family as they sign the surrender to place their child for adoption. Biological mom is crying. Biological dad is weeping. So men are capable of being amazing, loving fathers. It's just unfortunately not the norm for them to be involved. So back to what I was saying. The norm today is open adoption. It's on a continuum. And so the state of Ohio looking at profiles, so knowing something, seeing these people, seeing the hopeful adoptive parents, that's considered open. Now it can go all the way to having slumber parties and spending holidays together, like fully open adoption. I've seen it to where the adoptee would go spend a couple of weeks in the summer with the biological family alone and then would come back to their adoptive family. So it's just all, it's a relationship that's built over time. And it's so important to send these moms and dads choosing adoption to ethical adoption agencies that's teaching beyond the state requirement, and we'll get into that later, of what a healthy open adoption is and why it's needed for more than just the birth family or the biological family. Open adoption is unhealthy and confusing for the adoptee. Nope. Nope. When it's done ethically, with grace and love, no, it's not. There should never be a point in a child's life where they learn that they're adopted, because that's trauma. That's very traumatic. A child should always know from the get-go, you came from loving arms to loving arms. You were adopted, and that's not a shameful thing. A child should hear that. So open adoption is best practice, as I have here. That's multifaceted. So an adoptee can hear their adoptive family say, you were so loved by your birth mom. She wasn't able or ready to parent you. And so she worked really hard for a mommy and daddy who were ready and able to parent you. And so she very lovingly chose us to help raise you. That's important for adoptees to hear. But many adoptees need to hear that straight, and I don't want to call these women horses, but you know the saying, straight from the horse's mouth. So that's so important for the adoptee as they're growing, to have that connection to their heritage, their roots, especially transracial adoptees. It's important for the adoptive families to have open adoption. So let's say the adoptee, little Johnny, is showing signs of diabetes. And yes, we do the social and medical history, as we talked about before, but that's done all self-report, meaning it's all biological family, mom and dad, telling me that information. I or another assessor do not go to their doctor's offices and say, hey, can you tell me all the medical information that you have on, I don't know, Deborah, the biological mom looking to place little Johnny for adoption? We don't do that. So it's all what she tells us. And mind you, and we'll go over this a little bit about the psychology of going through trauma. These women aren't going to remember everything because they are going through so much. And if you think back to a time that you've gone through something tough, it's really hard to use your logical brain when your emotional brain is like, woo, we are in full blown speed ahead. And so while we do collect that information, it's not always going to be all-encompassing information because of that, or there might be new medical stuff that happens since baby was born for the biological family. So the adoptive family having access to that biological family gives them a wealth of medical information and a wealth of social information. So if the adoptive family doesn't have a musical bone in their body, but little Johnny grows up to be just this fantastic saxophone player. Well, biological dad was an amazing saxophone player, and that's where he gets it from. Like, that's just really cool information to have, and really good information to have to help build that child's self-confidence, their self-concept, just really help them parent a child into adulthood as healthy as possible. So access to medical information, and then answer questions about placement. So the child might say, why did my mom place me for adoption? And yes, the adoptive parents will be able to say your mom loved you and wasn't able to parent you, and explain it in an age appropriate way. But to hear that straight again from the horse's mouth, that's so important and like balm to these children's aching hearts of hearing, oh, I did love you and I still love you so much. I just wasn't in the space to be able to take care of you in the way that you deserved. Let's move on here. Oh, and two, just to throw this in there as well, is it's best practice for the birth moms and the birth dads. So they get to see that the family that they chose, they're doing their absolute best to raise their child. And by their, I mean biological families and the adoptive families, their child. They're doing their best to raise their child. And that child is safe and loved and well cared for. That, again, is balm to the aching heart of the biological family, being able to see that as the child grows. I didn't have that. For the first 2 years of my child's life, I got pictures and updates. And when I placed, it was through snail mail. Now it's through email or text, however the families decide to set that up. But for me, it was through snail mail. And back then, when I placed, it was typical to have a semi-open adoption, is what it was called, where it's pictures and letters, and then it was on a timestamp. So I got that for the first 2 years of my child's life, and then that ended. It was not ended because the adoptive family were terrible or didn't follow through with what they promised. They went above and beyond. I asked for pictures and updates. The beloved woman that I am now in reunion with, who is the mother of my child, she sent me full scrapbook pages and a scrapbook to put those pages into. Just beautifully done scrapbook pages. So yeah, she went above and beyond what I asked. But that was just the norm back then. And so I went from semi-open to closed, seeing that my child is safe and loved and well cared for, and then just trusting and praying and hoping that my child is safe, my child is loved, my child knows that I love them so very much. I am in reunion with my child as well, so happy endings there, but that was hard. So yeah, best practice all the way around. So here we'll get into a little bit of the psychology behind women and men in crisis choosing adoption, or just clients in general, no matter what they choose coming into your agency, parenting, or if they choose abortion. Dr. Siegel, who wrote a lot of really amazing books, talks about flipping your lid, and you'll see the diagram here, but it's essentially, make myself a little bit bigger, maybe. Yep. Okay. So he talks about flipping your lid, which is, this is the diagram of your brain here. Okay. So this would be your prefrontal cortex, this part right up in here. This is the adulty part of the brain, to put it in layman's terms. So this is where planning, reasoning, pre-planning, reasoning, that kind of stuff is. And there's more in there, but we're doing this in super layman's terms here. So this is the area where you're able to make big logical decisions. Inside here is going to be your emotional part of your brain. So this is going to be the limbic areas. So the hippocampus, the amygdala. So when essentially a trigger comes in, something traumatic happens, or you're going through something really difficult, what can happen is what Dr. Siegel calls flipping your lid. So the adulty, logical, pre-planning, reasoning part of the brain essentially goes offline, and the emotional part of the brain is in full force, full speed ahead, as we kind of talked about previously. So it's really, really hard to make decisions, future-minded decisions, when we're in this space. So fight, flight, freeze, fawn. We've all probably heard of that. So essentially, that's what this is. Another amazing author and a doctor, Dr. Nadine Burke Harris. She has a book called The Deepest Well that she talks about the ACE score. And for those who aren't familiar with the ACE score, it's adverse childhood events. And it's different things that a child can go through, like divorce, a parent in jail, the loss of a parent, abuse, whether that be emotional, physical, sexual, a lot of other things in there. So your ACE score directly impacts your health. So your childhood happenings directly impact your physical health. I'm not going to get too much into this and epigenetics and all of that because that's just way too much. But essentially, what's happening here is when people go through trauma, it really impacts them. And so while we can't take away the trauma necessarily, we can be aware of who we are sitting across from. Look for signs of this person's really spiraling or dysregulated and having a hard time thinking future mindedly because they're so stuck in the trauma of the present that they can't get to the logical thinking of the future. Whether that be they're stuck in trauma of what happened to them in their childhood or stuck in the trauma of what's happening here and now. And I'm not asking you by any means to be counselors to these people because that would not be ethical for you guys to counsel these women or men. What I'm saying though is we can be further triggers to these men and women when they're in our present. So yes, they're coming in looking for help, but perhaps their environment, their ACE score has taught them in the here and now that people really can't be trusted, and I need to be hyper vigilant to look for any signs of this person has no intent to help me and that they're not safe. And so when they have their emotional brain up, I can tell you from my own experience of going through that, I had what I called trauma lenses on. So we'll do this for visuals. I had trauma lenses on. So I was viewing everybody, everything in my environment, looking for anything that showed you don't actually have the intent to care for my heart or my story or my needs. And so that comes through in reading people's verbal, vocal, and visual are all different here. I'll get into that, sorry. Reading body language, facial expressions, and then tone of voice. So to get into this, communication and how the mind determines the meaning of it here, I could say, we'll do this practice here. I'm going to say a phrase and I'm going to say it in a few different ways, and you're going to notice how on the influx of my voice, it communicates different things. And then we'll relate it back to what I'm saying to you. So I didn't say you were silly. So the way that I said that, you probably picked up, I'm trying to communicate to you that I didn't say that, but somebody else did. Or next one, I didn't say you were silly. So that strain on the word say is communicating, I thought it, I just didn't say it. And then the last one we'll do is, I didn't say you're silly. That change on the way that I said silly there is indicating I said something about you. I just didn't say you were silly. And so when these women and men come into your office, a lot of them are going to have their trauma glasses on, whether it be from their ACE score being high or the trauma that they're currently going through. And so they're going to be listening to your tone of voice and how you say things very intently. So we want to make sure that we have a kind, empathetic tone and that we don't come off gritting our teeth or feeling pulling away from them in our body language. because this communicates, even if we're not meaning to communicate that, this communicates, I don't want to be near you. Or if we have our arms crossed, this communicates, I'm very closed off from you. We don't want to do that. We want to make sure that our body language is very open and we're engaged facing towards them, very intentful with our tone of voice, making sure that we're not communicating things that we're not trying to. Like I didn't say you were silly, that example that we did. We want to make sure that our tone is very empathetic and warm, very understanding. Our facial expressions should be very kind. If we have these cultural biases that we're bringing in, if a woman's saying, I really want a place for adoption, can I have your help? Or I really want to abort this child. We need to be careful to not make faces like anything like that. We need to be aware of our facial expressions and stay warm and soft and engaged so that these women feel safe to tell us their truth of what they're going through so that we can authentically help them by equipping them with knowledge, resources, and support. So again, you're not to be their counselors. You're just, I want to equip you with what these women are viewing, more than likely looking for, oh, you're not safe. Okay, I won't be coming back here to get your support, your help. I'm out of here. We want to be very intentional to have a space of grace, even when we hear hard and ugly things, because I'm sure we're going to hear hard and ugly things being in this line of work. And we need to not disengage because that's going to show us as untrustworthy. Alrighty. Okay, I'm going to make myself smaller again here. So we want to empower clients with knowledge so that they can make their informed choice. So remember how we talked about clients have autonomy, their choice is their choice. We have no control over what they choose. So that goes both ways. If we have a client that chooses to let's say, have an abortion, that is not on us. That is not on you. That was their choice that they made. Or if we have a client who decided to parent and they're absolutely thriving, that's not on us. That's not on you. That victory, that empowerment is that mama's to own. Because she needs that victory. She needs that win. And she needs to know that she has the capacity to make wise and awesome decisions, and not that she has to rely on any of us in order to function. Because we don't want to set up that kind of dynamic, because then you're going to have somebody who is reliant on you for all their decisions. And that sounds like a way major responsibility that I personally can't handle and don't want to have. I already have 3 children that I'm parenting that require quite a bit of that. I can't handle taking on an adult like that. And so there is empowerment for us in knowing that we empower our clients through knowledge, through resources, and through support, but we are not the owners of any of their decisions. They are. Another thing that I want to bring up is we don't ever want to advise these clients. Okay. Advising them would mean that we're essentially telling them what to do. And these clients just need knowledge. They don't need somebody coming in and doing the hard work for them. So an example of that would be case management in social work. So what that would be is helping women link to resources. So a social worker can help a client, or you guys can help a client get access to different resources. So in a meeting, you could talk to a client. What are your immediate needs? Do you have safe housing? Do you have steady food? Do you need help finding a job? All of these things you can help a client with, but to take over all of that stuff, to fill out the job application for the client, turn it into the place of business for the client, that's not empowering the client. That is doing things for the client. And it's the same thing for advising a client. We don't want to do that. We want these clients to feel like they have ownership over their choices, and they don't have to rely on us in order to make those good, healthy choices that they are, or we certainly don't want ownership over any of the unhealthy choices that they're going to make if they do. And so just equip with knowledge, but don't advise. Don't tell a woman, oh, you need to. And certainly we don't want to use the word should, because that's very shaming. And there's a difference between guilt and shame. Guilt can be healthy and helps us to change, whereas shame is not a space where we change. Shame is a space where we build self-concepts. So what we think and feel about ourselves, that's where that becomes ugly and negative, and that's not healthy. So the word should, you should have turned that job application in. Why didn't you? That's not helpful, and that's going to, again, trauma lenses on. Should says finger pointing, and we want to be very intentional to not live life by the finger, but by the heart. So just equipping with knowledge is where we want to be. And this little picture here that I made is, do you have a mess of voices trying to tell you how to handle your unplanned pregnancy? Spirit of Faith Adoptions is here to help empower you to find and use your voice, to find and use the voice that matters most, yours. And so that would be the same thing with you guys, is these mamas probably have a ton of people telling them, you should do this, you should do that, you shouldn't do that, you shouldn't do this. And so you don't want to be another voice that says, oh, I have authority over you, and I have the audacious gall to tell you what's best for your life. And we don't want that, because that's going to send these women right out the door. We just want to be a space that says, you are capable. You are able to make smart and good choices. You just need a little assistance, and that's what we're here for. That's why you came in. And so here's the knowledge on all these different options of parenting, adoption, or abortion. And I'm not advocating that you send these women to the abortion agencies. I'm just saying, as pregnancy centers, at least the one that I worked with and the ones that I've been to before, they talk about abortion. They talk about what that does. They're very honest, but don't refer. So anytime I talk about that, that's what I mean. And just equipping these women with all of these resources, whether it be knowledge or social welfare resources, or equipping them with a local church that can bring them meals after baby comes home, or after they place a child for adoption, to speak a little bit into the different realms of parenthood that I have been through. So I've placed a child for adoption. I've obviously parented children, as I've talked about, and I've also had a miscarriage. The parented children and the miscarriage, I got flowers. I had people coming to my door bringing me meals. When I placed my child for adoption, nobody came. And I get teary-eyed about that because not for me, but for the women who place today, we are so intentional to do all that we can to get churches to show up for these mamas and bring them meals, start a meal train for them. And that's not always possible. And we as an agency cannot give them anything because that's unethical and that could be seen as coercion. But when we can link with other resources to bring them a meal and just sit with them and then invite them to church, that is so powerful in showing these women, the love that you got through the process of placing your child for adoption, that care, that empathy, that doesn't stop now that your baby's gone. You are still so worthy of kindness and respect and effort of the body of Christ because God loves you so much. That's that's where my passion lies in loving and serving women after they've made a choice to place a child for adoption, greatly because of what I've been through. All right, now next slide. So some language to give you guys. Adoption is sometimes met with, oh, I could never. And so sometimes wording it as, have you considered making an alternative parenting plan? Or have you thought about an alternative parenting plan? Or what do you know about an alternative parenting plan, which would be the best of all three that I just said to you? But an alternative parenting plan. So I think we'll get into it here relatively soon. So I don't want to touch upon that. So we'll just pivot from that. Sorry. Thinking out loud here. Yeah, adoption's not giving your child up, it's making an alternative parenting plan for your baby. So if you're met with some pushback, that's a really awesome piece of knowledge for you guys to confidently say of it's not giving up on your child. It's making an alternative parenting plan. And you can stay connected with your child with an open adoption. And we'll get a little bit more into open adoption and what that means for the state of Ohio. So again, you can have that confidence in sharing. I understand this. I have this knowledge. I feel good in my ability to communicate about adoption. So anyways, open adoption, staying connected to your child and their adoptive family. Open adoption is a relationship between you, the adopted family, you get to pick, and your child. So this is just some of the language that you can use. You can change it up to bit to accommodate your normal speaking pattern. You can choose the adoptive family that is open to sending you pictures and updates of your child, or if you want to have visits, you can choose a family that's open to visits. We teach our hopeful adoptive families and the biological families that as with any relationship, we're not just going to delve head first in and give each other our phone numbers, our home addresses, and have full access to each other. We need to build that trust and learn what healthy boundaries means to each party. And so we as an agency, we're there for the lifelong. Of adoption, because adoption is not one single event at birth and then it's just done and over with. That's not how that works at all. But we're very intimately involved for at least the first 6 months. And if the biological families and the adoptive families feel like they need our help in building that relationship, we're there. If they feel like, you know what, we're pretty good, we feel like we have good communication and we're able to speak our boundaries and they're respected, we'll just call on you if we need you. We've had that before too, but we are here in whatever capacity we're needed after the child is placed for adoption, which we'll go into a little bit of how we have to legally be involved. But as far as that relationship building piece is what I'm speaking about here. All right, let's move me over here. Sorry, I don't like doing this because you get so used to looking in one area at me and then I'm just boom over here. But we need to pivot so we can see what's going on here. All right, so some language for you, birth mom and birth dad. So the definition there, if you look it up, is somebody who has delivered a child and has placed them for adoption. So if a woman is pregnant, she has not placed her child for adoption. If a woman has delivered her child and she has not signed the consent forms for her child to be adopted, she's not a birth mom. We want to be very intentional with our language to not coerce any woman, excuse me, or man to feel like they have to place. So if we place a title on somebody when that title does not apply, that could be coercive, and we want to be very careful with that. So the language, the language that we want to use here is either biological parents, which really that can be used even after somebody places for adoption, or we could use expectant parent. Either one is fine. In the adoption community, I do not police how those who are a part of the triad, and the triad is, if you picture a triangle, the bottom is the adoptive parents and the birth parents, and at the top is the adoptee. So those who encompass the triad do not police how they use language to describe their own story. If it's somebody outside of the adoption triad and they're saying they're using language that does not line up with empathy and kindness, we want to gently we don't want to educate as in I'm going to teach you how to talk, but we want to just use the proper language without correcting them. So what I mean by that, if a mom were to say, oh, I could never give my child up. Well, we can counter that with, well, it's not giving up, it's making an alternative parenting plan. When you place your child for adoption, you get to choose the family. So you see how I empathetically guide and use the language without saying, oh, actually, you're saying that wrong. So, because again, these women are gonna, whoa, see ya. Trauma glasses are saying that's not a safe person. So we want to be very intentional to not make the time that we have with these men and women into a lesson, but we want to equip with knowledge. Okay. And then, so for those who are outside of the triad, who are using the term giving a baby up, historically, that comes from the early 1900s, I believe it was, where babies, or excuse me, children were literally given up onto a train and then shipped across the Northwest, and people would come to that train to say, oh, I would like that child to help me on my farm, and then they would adopt that child. That was called the orphan train. So that's where that term comes from, giving a baby up for adoption. And so we don't want to use that language. Now, if somebody who is a part of the triad is using that language, we're not going to police them on how they express their own story, because that might be how they feel about their own story, or that might be the only language that they know, but it's not our job to police them on how they want to share their story. But those who are coming in who have cultural biases and just need to be equipped with knowledge, we want to be intentional on our own language and not use language like that. I've always found it fascinating of where words come from. I'm a history buff. Maybe you're not, but I appreciate learning where things come from. And so that one is particularly interesting to me as personally and both as an adoption assessor. But yes, I digress. What did it do? Yeah, so we talked about birth or first parent. We didn't talk about first parent, but in the adoption community, the triad community, birth moms are referred to as birth moms or first moms or natural moms or biological moms or just moms. So I've had some pregnancy centers say, oh, you know, I use the term birth mom and these women recoil, like it has this like just icky connotation that comes with it. So there's other terms, other titles that can be used, like first mom or natural mom. But again, as the number one is stating here, we don't use those titles until these women have signed the surrender paperwork to make that adoption official. That does not happen until 72 hours after birth. Yep, mom and dad are usually the preferred terms. Hopeful adoptive parents. In the adoption community, again, we term that as HAP, hopeful adoptive parents or potential adoptive parents, before they take placement of the child. After that, they're adoptive parents or parents. And again, at the bottom, placing a child for adoption, not giving a child up. Alrighty, so we won't go super deep into this. I just want you to have access to this so that if you want to on your own time to go through this and learn a little bit more, it's there. So major points. A biological mom or dad, if he's involved, cannot sign on the adoption, sign off on the adoption until 72 hours after birth. So that doesn't mean 72 hours comes, we better do it right here, right now, or it doesn't happen at all. It just means it cannot happen before that time, but it can happen anytime after that. We at Spirit of Faith Adoptions are licensed to place children from birth to age 2. So if you have a child coming in older than 2 years old, we could help link with resources, but we wouldn't be able to help place that child for adoption, which usually we've had that happen once before, and that mama just needs some support and some help to be able to parent her child or children, whatever the case may be. So openness in most of the states in America, unfortunately, is very biased against biological families. It is my hope and prayer that that changes within my lifetime, but we shall see. Either way, the current law is that open adoption in Ohio is a gentleman's agreement, meaning it is a relationship and not a legality. So a biological family cannot take an adoptive family to court if they do not follow through with the terms that they agreed upon for openness. So what I mean by that is if they planned a picnic date at the park between the adoptive family and the biological family and the adoptee, and then the adoptive family doesn't show up, the biological family cannot take them to court because there's no legal backing there. It's all about relationships. So I cannot stress enough how important it is to make sure that you are aligning your agency with ethical agencies, ethical adoption agencies who are training hopeful adoptive parents above and beyond what the state requires for openness. I'm sorry, there's a little net in here. I apologize for the hand waving. and to also make sure that they're vetting their families. The adoption agencies are vetting their families, and those who have no intent to have an open adoption are not let through, because open adoption is best practice. Having a closed adoption is not best practice for anybody involved. And it goes both ways for that gentleman's agreement. If the adoptive family made a picnic date at the park with the biological family and the biological family didn't show up, didn't follow through with coming to any of the events, they can't take them to court. There's no legally binding contract there. Now, Spirit of Faith Adoptions, we do have a policy in-house, so it's not a state legislation. It is an in-house, which each adoptive family is aware of that they have to sign, and it's our openness agreement of what we expect bare minimum. And so that is lots of pictures and updates aligning with every single doctor's appointment. So the first one is as soon as they get home from the hospital. The second one is at 1 week, which there's a doctor's appointment there, and then lining up with doctor's appointments from there on out. Also, we expect on Mother's Day, if dad's involved, then we expect on Father's Day, and then up until 3 years, and then once a year after that. Now, again, this is bare minimum. The biological family and the adoptive family certainly can work together to figure out, oh, we actually want more than that. We want to communicate on a regular basis. That's fine. That's wonderful. We hope that happens, but it's all bare minimum of what we expect in our contract agreement, I should say. And then we also have in there, we are willing to consider, or I am willing to consider, for the adoptive parents and then the biological mom or dad's involved, visits in the future. And so that's, we do the best that we can, given that there's no law to set up for the biological families. You can expect to get updates at these points. So there's never a, oh, I hope I get something. I don't know if I will. They can just refer right back to that list and know when it's coming. And then we tell our hopeful adoptive, we tell our hopeful adoptive families and adoptive families as well, send it the day before. Make sure that she knows she's not forgotten. She's wholly thought of and loved. So social medical history, we went over that. Laws and materials, I won't get super into that, but that's another thing that we have to do. The putative father registry. So in the state of Ohio, again, I'm not a lawyer, but from my understanding of the law, a biological dad does not have to be informed if an adoption is going through. He has the legal responsibility to go to the mom and say, hey, we had relations. Did a child come from this? The mom is not required to say, hey, we had relations and a child came from that. And so there's the putative father registry that he can go to online, and he can sign his name on that, or type his name in that, I should say, and submit that. If he thinks that there's an adoption happening, and that doesn't automatically make it to where he can parent, it makes it to where he is then allowed to have a court hearing to prove that he supported the biological mom financially or emotionally. And he has to also prove that he is able to parent. So it's not often that we have dads come forward and sign that list. Unfortunately, usually what happens is dads find out that there's a pregnancy and then they run because they don't want anything to do with that responsibility. And so these women are left to take care of themselves and their children by themselves. So hopeful adoptive parents have to do a home study. So hopeful adoptive parents aren't just any random Joe Schmo off the street. They have to go through a bunch of loopholes loopholes. Oh my goodness, a bunch of hoops to get to the point where they have a profile book for biological parents to see. So in this home study, they have to show financial records. They have to have mental and physical examinations to prove that they're mentally and physically capable of caring for a child, and financially capable of caring for a child. If they have well water, that has to be tested to make sure it's safe. Their water heaters have to be within a certain temperature so that it doesn't scald a child. There's just really nitty gritty things that these people have to go through, and it's very vulnerable, but they're willing to do it because they want to show up and love a child and add a biological family to their own extended family. The state of Ohio mandates that biological moms, not dads here, get $3,000 in living expenses. So that would help with if she needs a place to stay, if she needs food, if she needs a cell phone to be able to call the doctor or to call the adoption assessor or what have you. We've had in the past where a mom needed a car. And so we have this really incredible partnership with this car ministry that was able to get a mom a reliable car for really, really cheap. So it's needed funds to help these moms to live. And then a surrender cannot happen until 72 hours after birth. It also cannot happen until 72 hours after the social medical history and the laws and materials are done. So if a baby's born, an assessor would have to come and do those paperwork items with that mama, and then 72 hours would have to happen, and the dad if he's involved. So all of the things that are underlined, those are links, which I will send you the original of this so that you can be able to push on those links. Agency red flags. Okay, sorry, I'm trying to be respectful of your time. I know this is a lot of information and a lot of time taken up. I so appreciate your willingness to learn this and hear all of this cumbersome information, but you will have access to this recording to be able to go back through and kind of revisit the things that you want to retouch on or that you want to learn a little bit more on. So agencies, how to spot red flags. Does the agency promise adoption to hopeful adoptive parents within a certain period of time? So if you are calling an agency and saying, how long does it take to adopt? And they say, oh, it only takes 6 months. Why does it only take 6 months? Why do you know that timeline? That could mean that that agency is coercing women into placing their children for adoption. That could be a very major red flag of do not align with them because they are not treating biological families with kindness and respect and helping them to parent overall before helping them make an adoption plan. So another red flag is the agency only teaches state mandated materials on adoption. No further education on adoption is provided. That's not good. You want an agency that is equipping hopeful adoptive families to be able to show up for their kids and love them well, and to be able to show up for the biological families and love them well. And it's not just during the adoption process, pre-birth, but it's for the lifelong. Like we give trainings often, and in fact we do what's called an orientation, or I do an orientation where it's not as cumbersome as my book that I previously mentioned, but I share my story of placing a child for adoption, and we have all the people who are thinking about lining up with Spirit of Faith Adoptions to become hopeful adoptive parents. We have them all go through that to help build their empathy and see that, you know, birth moms aren't people with 7 arms and 15 eyes. We're normal human beings that love our kiddos. And yeah, we've been through trauma, but we're still normal. We're not to be feared. And then adoption agencies that are for profit. You want to be a little wary of those. Nonprofit agencies are not looking to benefit financially off of placing children for adoption. So they're not motivated to place children for adoption. We are a nonprofit. We are grant funded. We are a 501c3. So we get the tax deductions, all that kind of good jazz, but we are not for profit. So I would be wary of for profit. So some questions to ask agencies. So I am not advocating that you lie. I'm certainly not doing that. I would just state that you are interested in adoption through their agency. The reason I say that is because you want to be careful to not say, hey, I'm a pregnancy center and I'm looking to learn more about your agency. You're not necessarily going to get the same information that they give to prospective adoptive families, and that's more in line with the information that you're looking for. So just stating that you're interested in adoption through their agency. How many adoptions do they have each year? How many birth moms do you typically work with each year? And here I am advocating that you use the incorrect language. Don't say, how many biological moms do you work with every year? Because that's going to indicate to some agencies, oh, this is somebody that already knows quite a bit. So let's tailor our answers. And again, I'm not advocating that you lie to these agencies. I just want you to get their honest feedback so that you can know what agencies you feel comfortable sending your clients to. What supports do you have in place for when clients choose adoption, or for when moms or birth moms, however you want to word that, choose adoption? So Spirit of Faith Adoptions, we have a private Facebook group for women who have placed for adoption, run by me, a birth mom. And we also have Fireweed Retreat, which is a yearly retreat in September. It is the only Christ-centered retreat in the nation that I'm aware of. Unfortunately, it is a huge, huge need. There are other retreats that are secular out there that focus on the trauma and the loss, but I didn't need that, and I don't want that even now in my adoption journey. I wanted validation of, I'm not the trauma I've been through. I am the daughter of a king. I am worthy and beloved. That's what I need to hear, not validation that what I went through was really hard and that's it. I needed more than that. So do you have resources, connections for clients who choose to parent? So for those families who choose to not place for adoption, but choose to parent their children, do you just drop them, or do you help them find resources? And the answer for Spirit of Faith Adoptions is, that is my job. That's what I do. I link women and families with resources no matter what, because I don't want them to feel like they're coerced of, you only get to have me if you make certain decisions. No, if you are on the path to making an adoption plan and you decide, you know what, I really do want to parent, great. Let's get you some resources so that you can do that from a place of being equipped. All of that will give you an idea of, are they respecting women and men who come to them considering adoption? Because ultimately that's what you're looking for. Can I trust these agencies to take the utmost care for the men and women that I'm sending to them? And then a little bit of role playing. And I know we're on Zoom and this is a recording, so it's going to be a little bit different. So I'm just going to kind of go through this, and this might help spark you guys to have some role playing of your own. And just to remind you, we've talked about things like, rather than saying place for adoption, talk about alternative parenting plan of adoption. And just to reiterate here, before we get into this, the goal is not to get a client to choose adoption. The goal is to listen, empathize, validate, and equip her with knowledge so that she can make an informed decision that is her own on what is best for her and her child. Again, you have no ownership over what she chooses, nor should you, good or bad. That needs to be hers and hers alone. Even though it's hers and hers alone, it doesn't mean she has to make that decision alone. You can come alongside her and equip her, but ultimately she has the autonomy over herself and her life. Okay, so role playing, the advocate. I have heard so many times, have you ever considered adoption? One, from a social work perspective, that's a closed-ended question. That's going to get you a yes or a no. That's going to get you peas, not getting you meat and potatoes of what you're looking for and answer-wise. Where we want to pivot to is an open-ended question, and one that's going to help avoid what's coming next. Tell me about what you know about adoption. Excuse me. Even when you ask it in that open-ended question, because that cultural bias could be very heavy there, you still might get, I could never give my baby up. You might hear, I'd rather abort than rather abort than give my baby up for adoption. Because that cultural bias says birth mom equals bad mom. And now's not the time to say, okay, let's talk about parenting. Now's the time to lovingly engage and help equip her with knowledge, because that's ultimately what you're there for, is to equip with knowledge. So when they say, or if they say, I could never give my baby up, that's the time to say, will you talk to me about why you feel that way? Do you maybe have a personal or family experience with adoption or foster care? And then that might help open the door to hear, oh, my cousin was in foster care, or I was in foster care. And then you can express to her how adoption and foster care are not the same thing. You can choose the family. You can meet the family. You can have a relationship with the family. And open adoption allows for continued relationship with your child so that you can see that your child is growing healthy and happy. And just pour more into her, giving her the facts that counteract the cultural biases that she's bringing in. And again, this is why it's so important that if we have cultural biases, to let those stay outside of that advocate room. Because again, you don't have control over what she chooses, nor should you. So those biases shouldn't be coming in with you, because you're just here to give her information, not to make her choice for her. Okay, let's talk more about parenting. This isn't great because it's lacking education. It's not giving her that knowledge that she deserves to have. You're not trying to convince her one way or the other. You're just equipping her with factual information. So some of the better things that we could say is, I hear your heart and your concern. My role is to equip you with knowledge so that you can make the best choice. And then you can go into open adoption, allows you to stay connected with your child as he or she grows. Or many moms who I speak to have never been told that foster care and adoption are not the same thing. Open adoption allows you to stay connected with your child as he or she grows. So just depending on what information you're getting from her is kind of where you can share a little bit more in the proper context here. So it's all about building that confidence in you being equipped with knowledge and you being equipped with resources like Spirit of Faith Adoptions to be able to communicate with these mamas. And what I mean by that, it's not just we're an adoption agency. You can call us if somebody wants to place for adoption. I'm a birth mom. If you have somebody that's considering adoption, but not necessarily wanting, sorry, my Alexa was still on. It was announcing summertime while we work, huh? I apologize. I've lost my train of thought here. When we are talking to these moms, we want to make sure that they understand the knowledge here. It's not about leading her towards a decision, but it's about equipping her with knowledge. I do believe. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and end it here. We just have our resource list on the next one, but this is Mission Increase, which is an amazing organization. It helped Spirit of Faith Adoptions make a video for pregnancy centers to watch with clients. So that's what this is here. I'll let you guys watch that on your own time. And then down here is our client referral form. So if you don't have what's called an ROI, or in social workers love their acronyms. It's also called a release of information. If that's not something that your pregnancy center does, and not all do, then you would just need to fill out the things on the client referral form here. We'll just do this real quick. If it's going to let me. No, it's not. Oh, there we go. Just had to do that. So the expectant parent referral form, the asterisk implies things that need to be given. So email, so that I'm able to reach back out to you if need be, your client's first name. If you do not have a release of information, please do not give me your client's last name. When you don't have a release of information, that means you cannot share information beyond surface level information with other resources. When you do have an ROI, that allows you to share more information about the client. And it allows me to ask you information to be able to support the client if you're wanting me to connect with the client. You don't have to have an ROI. That's not something that I'm saying you must have in order to work with Spirit of Faith Adoptions. It just makes things a lot neater and easier when it comes to caring for clients. So just to give you an idea of what that is. But thank you guys so much for watching this Zoom. We are here. Spirit of Faith Adoptions is here. If you have any questions or want to dive a little bit deeper into some of the other information, but I just appreciate you guys and all that you're doing, the hard, emotionally taxing work that you're doing. It's not a loss on me of how hard you women work. So thank you for that. Alrighty, so I will go ahead and end us out. And again, thank you, and hope to see you in the future. Bye.